What's going on, guys? I'm Lance Corey.
I'm Juan Arceo.
And today we're here at Thrashin Supply. We have two of our Dynas behind us, a early model Dyna and a late model Dyna. We've been getting a lot of questions on the vlogs and through social media of which bike we like. So today we kind of wanted to go over the differences of them, what we like about each of them. You know, maybe that'll help you make a choice on which one you want to grab. The Dyna was introduced in 1991. It was introduced with a 5-speed transmission and an Evo engine. Now in 99, they kept that 5-speed transmission, but they introduced it with a twin cam engine. And all the way up until 05, that bike nearly stayed the same with the same size 39mm front end, 5-speed transmission, and the same frame. And then in 06 is when they transitioned the bike into the late model Dyna. They made a bigger frame with a 6-speed transmission and a 49mm bigger front end. It was wider. Overall, the bike was bigger, had bigger back tire. Now Juan, with that being said, what year is this thing?
So we have a 2002 FXDX, and then we have a 2013 Street Bob.
The 2002 FXDX, what made us decide, hey, let's go for the FXDX, let's go for 2002. You know, I know that there was a year in 04 where there was half years with fuel injection and carbureted. Like, why did we choose this year itself?
So it was a couple of things, right? We actually got guidance from our buddies that ride these a lot at East Coast, and so they recommended 02 to 05 had the good transmission.
Okay.
So that was one of the big things, right? I'm not sure exactly what was different, but the transmission's better. 39mm front end, and this one's carbureted. I think it's a combination of things, right? The lighter front end, it's a smaller frame, carburetor, and it makes the bike just a really good all-around stunt bike.
So another thing that I want to add to that, a big reason that we were looking for the 02 model, and I believe even maybe 01 has this year, but in the 02 FXDX, it came with the better brakes. I consider it from 99 to 04, and I don't even know if that's totally accurate because it might just be 91 to 04. But the thing about those Dynas is they had the 39mm front end. That's going to be the biggest difference that you're going to notice. It's the diameter of the forks and also the width. If you compare this to the late model Dynas with the 49mm front end and how much wider this setup is, the front end on these bikes ends up feeling quite a bit heavier, which does help for rolling down the highway. You can tell that the late model Dyna, it does roll a little bit better. It has the bigger back wheel, the wider back wheel, I should say. And so I feel like that bike tracks better, and that kind of parlays us into the fact that early model Dynas are 5 speeds and late model Dynas are 6 speeds. I would say hitting the road for touring, I've ridden a late model Dyna to Sturgis. It's a little bit more comfortable cruising at higher speeds for longer periods of time, better gas mileage, stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, the late model Dyna, you know, the gearing, it actually does have a wider and a bigger tire. That's a 17, and this is a 16. Okay. So 17-19, 16-19. But so, yeah.
Wait, say that again. That almost confused me a little bit. Basically, both bikes have a 19-inch front wheel, but then the backs, the early model Dyna
smaller,
has a 16 height.
Yep.
And the late model has a 17 height. But then what's the widths? The width on that, I think, is a 150 if you go check it, and I don't even know if that's the stock.
It should come with a 150. I don't know what's on there.
And this bike has a 160. So 160 17, 150 16. We're just talking about the rear wheel here. I have my cheat sheets here. Well, let's start off by saying early model Dyna 02 had an 88 cubic inch twin cam. By 2013, this one came with a 96 inch. But you could roll a late model Dyna off the showroom floor with a 96, a 103, and the Lowrider S Dyna came with a 110 cubic inch. Quite a lot of cubic inch engines to choose from that were in this frame and in this platform. They all came with a 6-speed, and one other thing to note is all late model Dynas had the exact same frame. So there actually are some early model Dynas that come with different frames that have different rake in the neck. I don't know exactly which ones are what rake, but that's another thing. You want to get the DX, which then has the tighter rake, tighter wheelbase. It's just a better handling bike. It's good peppy. Peppy and good in the turns, rather than the front end being a little more raked out. So one thing that actually blew my mind when we pulled up this cheat sheet to kind of like dig into the history of these bikes is that the actual FXDX in 2002 MSRP'd for $13,895. I actually thought that was quite a bit, considering I was only 12 years old at the time. I would have thought that this bike would have been a little bit more affordable then.
So I think a couple of factors came into play for that price. When it was first introduced, it got really high praise and ratings for the bike. Like when they sent it out to the media companies, it was a good handling bike. It was fast for what it was at the time, and so it kind of built its own little following back then. So they were able to ask for a premium price compared to like some of the Japanese bikes. The
interesting thing is over the course of basically another decade, a 2012 Dyna Street Bob MSRP'd for $14,259.
So is that like $500 more in like 10 years?
Yeah, that's pretty wild, to be honest with you. I'm mind blown. So you got to ask yourself, what did they do to make these, to manufacture them cheaper? And I know there's a couple things that some guys would say, like this bike came with Timken bearings on the crank, which they believe is known to be a little bit higher quality, and your crank's going to have a better run out and be more true with a bearing like that. Let's just talk about these bikes and the way that we like riding them, right? Because this is a 88 inch. We don't really know what's done to it. We threw a Mikuni on it. There's a pipe. It runs decent. Why is this bike almost easier to wheelie than the new Dyna? Is it just the front end?
I think, it's a couple of things. You touched on a different topic earlier, the shorter wheelbase. This is a couple inches shorter. I believe it's like 2 inches shorter. The less weight in the front, riding position. I mean, when you get on these bikes, this bike feels smaller. You could off the bat, without even really doing much, feel the size difference.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a big role in how it rides and how it wheelies. Even though it has less power, it could wheelie easier.
When we got this bike and I started riding it and I was wheeling and I already scraped the taillight like the first day, and I had no issues ever getting grip on this bike and wheeling it. You can tell it's slower. You can tell with the throttle that it's not as fast as even a stock 96, but it just, for some odd reason, the wheelbase of the bike allows it to stand up. So if you're looking at doing wheelies, I would suggest getting a early model Dyna, that 01 to 04 model bike.
It's just an all-around package, a smaller bike. You could have a lot of fun without getting into trouble, right? Because that's kind of more of a hot rod, and you're easily going 100 and hauling ass, where it doesn't have the power. You could still have that fun, but at a lower speed. You could still do the wheelies, you could still do the burnout, and you're not gonna lose track of throttle and end up going to 120, where you could do that on that bike.
That's for sure. Another thing that I'd like to go over that we haven't touched too much on is that early model Dyna with the carburetor and the late model Dyna with the fuel injection. Now, one thing that I do like about both of these bikes is they are cable throttle. You're not going to see that on any of the new modern Softail bikes. I do like the feeling of when you twist the throttle tube, you can actually feel the cables moving and feel the butterfly moving, or the slide, which would be on this bike, butterfly on this bike. Again, there's a hit or miss for that. Like if I'm just riding around local and I'm just kind of having fun here, there's something fun and raw about a carburetor. But I've ridden this bike across state lines and up in elevation, and there is something nice about this fuel injection system somewhat acclimating to the situation I'm in, and I'm not running super lean or super rich. It's adjusting itself enough.
So that's kind of like what I feel like separates these two bikes the most, right? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to be riding across state lines? Like both of us have ridden a Dyna to Sturgis before. What would make you choose that bike, and what would make you choose this bike? That's a question we get asked a lot.
Totally.
What are the biggest deciding factors for us?
Well, one thing is early model Dyna being, if you're looking for a clean one, and if you're looking for one that hasn't been highly modified with someone else's preference parts, maybe from an era that isn't that cool, it's a little bit harder to find a good FXDX between that era of like 01 to 04. So if you find one of these in your town and it's for a fair price, I would hop on it. I mean, it's a classic, it's a vintage. You're finding these on Craigslist. You were doing a lot of the searching when we were looking for this bike. I mean, what did you find?
It was really hard to find a clean, low mileage one of these, and when you did, they were really expensive.
Or they were like far away.
Yeah, they were far away. Like the newer model Dynas, they're definitely easier to find. And there's more of a variety, right? You could get some that are modified kind of weird, and you could find some stock looking ones. And I think the price range overlap.
Yeah.
Like you could definitely find both of these bikes at around the similar price range. So I think, like I said, the ultimate deciding factor for me would be like, what are you gonna use the bike for? We have the Dyna, but we also have touring bikes. So it's a little bit different. If I was gonna need a bike that did everything, which is like stunt a little bit, or like do some wheelies and burnouts and ride cross country, it would have to be the late model.
Yeah.
But if I had a bagger or another bike that I use for long distance road trips, and I just want a bike that I'm just gonna ride 20, 30 miles to Neptune's or the local restaurant, this is my choice for all the reasons.
Valid. I mean, let's put it this way too. On these bikes right now, a 2002 is 21 years old, right? So you're gonna deal with a little bit more finicky stuff, whether it's clogged jets or your petcock, something goes wrong with that. On this bike, we're noticing leaky primary. You're always gonna find yourself dealing with a little bit more issues with this. These bikes are also prone to cam chain tensioners going bad. If you haven't updated the cam chain tensioner, they're known to be ticking time bombs. So you're kind of in for a little bit more of a project, a little bit more of a hot rod, and something that you have to tinker with if you're gonna go with the early model.
Exactly. It's more of a hands-on bike, but anywhere you go with this bike, I feel like you need to have some kind of tools, whether it's a screwdriver, wrenches, and stuff like that. Where like on the late model Dyna, you could get away with going on a couple-day road trip and not having to take tools. I'm not saying you should, but they're just a little bit, because they're newer, the technology is more advanced, they're a little more reliable.
Well, something like this bike right now is just reaching its 10-year birthday. It's a 2013, and we're filming this as 2023. So this bike's 10 years old. I've put over 30,000 miles on it. For the most part, the primary, the transmission, a lot of those things, they're still sound.
Yeah.
You know, I've changed the oil every, 3,000 to 5,000 miles. I've taken care of it, but not like too much care of it. I've abused it. I mean, you guys look at this bike right now. It's dirty, it's used and abused. To be honest with you, I kind of have my Dyna as it always starts, it's always ready. I keep it plugged in, but when we come to this one, oh boy.
We need to check the oil before we start it. Sometimes it gets a little bit of a backfire, but that's kind of what gives this bike its character. That's what makes it like so different, and that's what makes it appealing to some people. Some people might not like that, but hot rodders are into that. That gives it its soul.
The one final thing about these Dynas, both of these bikes are rubber mounted engines, and the crazy part about that is there's a rubber mount on the front, then it's connected to the swing arm in the back, which is also rubber mounted. So if the engine and the rubber mounts go bad, the engine moves, which moves the swing arm.
Yep.
It's totally wild, and that's why you'll see on my bike, I actually have an engine stabilizer, which I found actually made this bike ride much smoother. We have not put that on the 2002. It's missing that, and you can tell at higher speeds.
I've seen it while I was riding behind you the other day, and I saw it get a little squiggly.
Yeah, so these bikes, all Dynas, I believe, take a decent amount of fine tuning between engine stabilization and good suspension, and sometimes even like this bike has a steering stabilizer on it. So there is quite a bit to do to these bikes to make them, handle and perform the way that we ride them. Like you said, sometimes you can see the prices of these overlap quite a bit. Something that I like to look for in a Dyna, either one, even though I don't have one myself here, is I would prefer to have dual disc. I'd prefer to have mags. I'd prefer to have mid controls. And I just prefer to have something that's clean. It doesn't look too modified from the guy that I'm getting it. And it's even better when you can find an original owner, that a guy barely rode it, it's been in his garage.
Those are rare though. I think you guys got lucky with Cole's bike, but I looked for a long time trying to find this, and I could not find at least anyone that were close to us. I found a couple that were in Washington or in other states. Those are like finding a diamond in the rough.
So I do want to clarify that early model Dyna, late model Dyna, they come in many other models. I know we referenced the FXDX quite a bit, and we referenced the Street Bob, but early model Dynas, they came in lowriders, they came in convertibles, they came in the really sought after T-Sport, which I wish we had one of those in our lineup. The late model Dynas, they came in a lowrider as well. They came in a lowrider S that had a 110 cubic inch engine. They came in the Street Bob like we have here, and they came in many other models as well. Do a little bit of your own homework, figure out exactly what model, what pieces that those bikes have, the gas tanks they have, the fenders they have, that fits your style.
I just want to say rest in peace to the Dyna. It was in Harley's lineup from 91 to 2017, about 26 years. A lot of these models got absorbed into the Softail monoshock frame. We'll get into that in another video, but thanks for tuning in.
Hopefully this video helps you guys with your choice of the Dyna and you enjoyed watching it. We'll see you guys on the next one.
See you later.